extremely sorry. I just went off because of some technical reason. I'll come back to the same point. It is we are honored to have with us one of the iconic person, and I've seen a lot of videos of ma'am. This is Yoshiko Kashimoto from Hiroshima, Japan. It is afternoon there, so very first thing is like very good afternoon to everyone from the other part of the world, that is from Japan. This is almost 2:30 there at this moment of time. So it is Konnichiwa and Hajimemashite, which is, I suppose I have pronounced it properly. That refers to hello and very warm welcome to you all. We'll not spend much of my time, and you all know that the reason why you are here because of Yoshiko Kojimoto, who is going to tell us the experience, what she went through on 6th of August 1945, which was just 2.5 kilometers away from the place where this hypo center was, and 2014. So without wasting our time, with a big round of virtual applause from everyone of us, I request Yoshiko Kojimoto ma'am to take over, and it is our honor and pleasure at the same time to be in the same room where this wonderful person is with us today as our guest speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
はい、じゃあ、ちょっと、パワーポイントを出しますね。
May we share with you our PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
はい。
いいね。
もう始めていいですか？はい。
では、皆さん、こんにちは。
Good afternoon.
私は、梶本よしこと申します。今日は私の被爆体験を皆様にお聞きいただくことができて光栄です。
My name is Yoshiko Kajimoto. Thank you for listening to my testimony today. お顔映らなくてもいいですかね？
はい。
梶本さんのお顔が映らなくてもいいですかね？
パソコンには映って
ない。わかりました。はい。
大丈夫。
どうぞ。はい。
では、これから被爆体験をお話ししますが、まず、地図の説明をします。これは原爆が落とされた時の広島です。
Now I'd like to speak about my experience of the atomic bombing. First, let me show you a map. This is a map of Hiroshima at the time of the atomic bombing.
赤いところが焼け野原です。
The red indicates the burned out area.
半径2キロですから、4キロの広さです。
The radius is 2 kilometers, so the area is 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers.
写真を見てください。
Please look at the photo.
出てこない。
はい。
出てこない。
ここになんか
写真。
はい。
これは広島の町ですが、死の町になりました。
Hiroshima became a city of death.
後戻りして、からし色は爆風で家が倒れたけど焼けませんでした。白は半壊です。
Let me go back to the map. The yellowish brown area is where houses were destroyed by the blast, but not burnt. The white area is where houses were half destroyed.
広島は7本の川が流れています。平和公園はここです。
There were 7 rivers in Hiroshima. Today's Peace Park is here.
平和公園の入り口に相生橋という橋があります。
The north end of the park, there is a bridge called Aioi Bridge.
この橋が爆弾の投下目標ですが、実際に爆発したのは300メートル離れた島病院の上空600メートルでした。爆心地は島病院です。
This bridge was the target of the atomic bombing. The bomb actually exploded above Shima Hospital, about 300 meters away from the bridge, at the altitude of 600 meters. So Shima Hospital was the hypocenter.
ここから 2.3 キロ北に離れた工場で私は被爆しました。
I was 2.3 kilometers north of the hypocenter working at a factory.
爆心地から 2.5 キロ西の濃い という町に私は住んでいました。
I lived in the area called Koi in Hiroshima, 2.5 kilometers west of the hypocenter.
私は1931年に生まれました。今年92歳です。被爆の時は14歳で中学校の3年生でした。
I was born in 1931. Now I'm 92 years old. At the time of the atomic bombing, I was 14 and a ninth grader.
場所は爆心地から 2.3 キロ北で飛行機のプロペラの部品を作る作業中でした。あの頃の中学生は労働力として国の命令でみんな働いていました。
At a factory located at 2.3 kilometers north of the hypocenter, I was making airplane propellers. In those days, middle school students were all mobilized to work ordered by the national government.
1945年8月6日、朝から雲一つない晴天で太陽が照りつけ、暑い日でした。
On the morning of August 6, 1945, the weather was fine. There was not a cloud in the sky. The sun was shining brightly, and it was a hot day.
窓にパーッと真っ青な光が流れ、爆弾だと思いました。瞬間、頭の中に父、母、おばあちゃん、3人の弟の顔が鮮明に浮かんで、私はこれやるんだと思ったとき、本当に怖かったです。
Suddenly, a bright blue light flashed at the window. I thought we were bombed. At that instant, the faces of my father, mother, grandmother, and 3 brothers appeared before me. I thought I was going to die there. I was really frightened.
すぐ両手で目と耳を押さえ、機械の下に潜り込みました。
I immediately covered my eyes and ears with my hands and crawled under a machine.
次の瞬間、地球が爆発したと思うような大音響とともに土地が吹き上がって、私の体が浮き上がったところまで覚えています。木造の2階建ての工場の下敷きになり、気絶しました。
Next moment, I heard a tremendous roar. It was as if the earth had exploded. I remember the ground rose and I was lifted in the air. The 2-storied wooden factory collapsed on me and I fell unconscious.
どれほど経ったかわかりません。友達の悲鳴で気がつきました。
After some time, I came to as I heard my friends screaming.
真っ暗な中で何が起きたのかわかりませんでした。私はなんでこんなところにいるんだろうと考えますがわかりません。体を動かしてみると両手と頭が動きますが肩、背中、足までガレキや材木の下敷きになっていました。右の腕がズキズキと痛んで、その痛みで私は生きてるんだと思いました。
It was pitch black and I couldn't see what had happened. I didn't know why I was lying there. I tried to move. I could move my arms and my head, but my shoulders, back, and legs were stuck under the rubble and timbers. My right arm was throbbing with pain. As I could feel pain, I thought I must be alive.
しばらくすると目の前に足が見えて、友達が私の下敷きになっています。この足を一生懸命引っ張ったり揺すったりしていると気がついてくれて、お母さん助けて、痛いと叫びました。
Then I saw legs in front of my face and found that a friend was under me. I tried hard to pull her legs and shook them. Then she came to and screamed in pain, saying, "Mother, help me."
その声を聞いた時の嬉しかったこと、もしこの友達がいなかったら生きようとか外に出ようとか思わなかったと思いますが、私は早く出んと危ない、火事になるよと叫びました。
I was really glad to hear her voice. If she had not been there, I would have given up. Without her, I wouldn't have thought we had to get out. I called to her, "We must get out as soon as possible before fire breaks out."
それは工場が倒れると中で火を使っているので必ず火事になるといつも言われていたからです。
Our teachers had always said, if the factory collapses, there will be a fire as we use fire in the factory. So get out as soon as possible.
私は何とかして外に出たい。友達を助けたいと思いますが、体が動きません。その時、今火事になったらどこから焼かれるんだろう。髪の毛か足からか焼かれていく時どんなに暑いんだろうか。死ぬ時はどんなに苦しいんだろうか。真っ黒に焼かれた私の体を誰が見つけてくれるんだろうと、いろいろ考える時間がとっても怖くて長い時間でした。
I wanted to get out and help my friend, but I couldn't move. I thought, if fire breaks out now, which part of my body will be burnt first? My hair, my legs? How hot will it be? Who will find my body if it's charred? I was imagining all sorts of things. I was frightened. It felt so long.
叫んでいた友達が明かりが見える逃げようと言いました。一生懸命。
ಜಪಾನೀಸ್ ಅವ್ರು ಇದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ 92
友達の体が下の
ಝೂಮ್ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರ
これで逃げられると嬉しい。
ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್
ಅವ್ರ ಲೈಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಬಾಂಬ್ಗೆ 92 ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತಾ ಎಷ್ಟು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾಳೆ ಮತ್ತೆ
My friend who was screaming said, I see some light. Let's try to get out. Two of us tried hard to shake the lumber and rubble. Then my friend didn't know that we would be able to get out.
でも私の右足が材木に挟まって出ません。無理に思いっきり引き抜いた時にズボンが破れ、足も大怪我をして大量に出血しましたが、その時の痛みを覚えていません。足が出たことが嬉しくて、友達の名前を呼びながら、手か服か持って材木、瓦礫、機械の間を潜って、必死で張って出ました。
But my right leg was still trapped under a beam. When I pulled out my leg with all my might, my work pants were torn and my leg was seriously cut and bled badly, but I don't remember the pain. I was glad I was freed. I called my friend's name and held onto her hand and clothes as we crawled under the beams and rubble and machines and desperately tried to get out of there.
外に出ると、広島の街はこのような状態で何にもなく、すべてぺちゃんこに潰れていました。あれほど暑かった太陽もありません。暗くて静かで、魚が腐ったような異様な匂いがしていました。
When we got out, the city of Hiroshima was gone, as this picture shows. Everything was flattened. The hot sun was nowhere to be seen. It was dark and quiet. It smelled awful, like the smell of rotten fish.
出てきた友達は5、6人いましたが、髪は逆立ち、体中が真っ黒で、頭から血を流しているもの、手や足から血が吹き出ているもの、腕の肉がちぎれて皮がぶら下がっているもの、足の肉が取れて骨が見えているもの、白いユニフォームは血で染まっていました。みんな半狂乱でした。
I saw 5 or 6 of my friends outside the collapsed building. They were covered with soot, with their hair standing on end. They were bleeding from the head, hands, and legs. One of them had injured her arm, with the flesh ripped off and her skin hanging down. Another's leg bone was exposed. Their white uniforms were soaked in blood. Everyone was frantic.
私の下敷きになっていた友達が一番ひどい怪我で腕がプラプラ、皮一枚でつながって肉がちぎれ骨が見えて、それはかわいそうで見るのが怖いようでしたが、包帯も三角形もないので、私のブラウスの袖をちぎって傷に当てて鉢巻きでくぐることしかできませんでした。
My friend who had been under me was most seriously injured. Her arm was dangling down, deeply cut and almost ripped off, exposing the bone. I felt sorry for her. It was hard to look at her wounds. We didn't have a bandage or sling, so I tore the sleeve off my blouse, put it on her wound, and tied it with my headband. That was the only thing I could do.
私の足も出血がひどいので、ズボンの上から鉢巻きでくくって止血しました。工場の中には動けない人が叫びながらたくさん残っています。
I was almost bleeding badly from the leg, so I tied my leg with another's headband and stopped the bleeding. It was bleeding bad. Many were still in the factory, trapped under the collapsed building and crying for help.
怪我をして血を流している友達同士が柱や瓦礫を除いたり、機械を動かし、全員助けましたが、この人たちは骨折、打撲で立つことができず、座るか寝転んで、痛い、痛いと泣いていました。何の手当てもできませんでした。
Together with my friends who were also injured and bleeding, we moved the pillars and rubble and the machines and helped all of them out. Their bones were fractured and bruised, so they could not even stand up. They sat or lay on the ground crying in pain. We couldn't give them any treatment.
その頃、爆心地からお化けのような人たちがやってきます。両手を前に差し出して、焼けた皮がペロンと向けて、爪のとこで止まって、ボロ布が垂れ下がっているように見えました。
By that time, many people were coming from the city center. They looked like ghosts. They held their hands out in front of them. Their skin had peeled off and was hanging down from their nails like rag.
着ていた服は吹き飛ばされたのか焼かれたのか丸裸です。顔は風船のように膨れ、唇はめくれ、頭から体中から血を流し、よたよたと人の後ろについて並んでくる姿はお化けの行列のようでした。
They were naked. Their clothes might have been blown off or burnt. Their faces were swollen like balloons. Their lips were everted. They were bleeding from their heads and bodies and walking wearily like a procession of ghosts.
その中に中学生の男の子が自分のちぎれた腕を持って私の方にやってきて目の前で死んでしまいました。
Among them was a middle school student who was holding his arm. It had been cut off. He came toward me and fell dead in front of me.
大丈夫です。続けてます。
いいです。
はい。
その時の男の子の怖い悲しそうな顔は今も忘れることはありません。一瞬に焼かれ何が起こったかわからないまま死んできたんです。この中学生にも夢や希望があったはずです。
I cannot forget his frightened and sad look. He had been burnt instantaneously and died without knowing what had happened. I'm sure he had his own dreams and hopes.
死んだ赤ちゃんを抱いたお母さんが何かわからないことを叫びながらぐるぐる回っていました。気が狂っています。こんな無残な姿をした人が続々やってきます。どれも人間の姿ではありませんでした。
I saw a mother holding her dead baby in her arms. She was screaming something and turning around and around. She was insane. I saw many suffering people. They didn't look like humans.
お昼近くになった頃と思います。近くの家から火災が発生しました。自力で歩けない友達を担架に乗せ、4人で運びました。
It was probably around noon. A fire had broken out at a nearby house. We found stretchers and carried our friends who couldn't walk. 4 students carried one stretcher.
工場から公園まで数百メートルの距離ですが、その長かったこと、重たかったこと、足が痛かったことを覚えています。友達を助けるために必死で運びました。
It was only a few hundred meters from the factory to the nearby park, but it seemed so far. I remember the stretcher felt really heavy and my legs hurt. It took all our strength to carry our friends.
その頃、街の中は死体でいっぱいでした。 死体を踏まないように歩くんですが、皮をぶら下げたまま死んでいるので仕方なく、ぬるっとした皮を踏んだことをはっきり覚えています。今もあの感触を忘れることはありません。
The city was full of dead people. I tried not to step on them, but I couldn't help it. Since they had died with their skin peeled off from their bodies, I couldn't avoid stepping on their skin. I clearly remember the feel of their slimy skin.
道には目が飛び出ている人、内臓が流れている人、肉片が転がっていたり、血の匂いやら、それは地獄です。
There were people whose eyes had popped out and whose internal organs had spilled out. Pieces of flesh were scattered on the streets and it smelled of blood everywhere. The city was hell itself.
死体を離れて逃げるようなことは絶対あってはならないと強く思います。
You have future. I hope you never have to escape like that, stepping over dead bodies.
夜は川戸瀬で一夜を過ごしました。真っ赤に燃えている広島の空を見ながら家族のことを考え、泣き泣き一睡もできませんでした。
We spent that night on a riverbank, gazing at the burning city. I thought about my family. I cried and couldn't sleep at all.
2日目も怪我をした友達をより安全な北部へ運ぶのに一生懸命でした。
On the second day, we did everything we could to get our injured friends to safer places in the north.
一方、市内のあちこちで死体の焼却が始まります。原爆で焼かれた体があっちでもこっちでも山に積まれ、太陽の熱で腐っていき、ウジ虫がいっぱい湧いて、人が腐る匂いは言葉になりません。
The cremation of dead bodies started at many places in the city. The bodies burnt by the atomic bomb were rotting under the hot sun. The rotting bodies were covered with maggots, and the smell was awful.
空き地や道端に死体を重ね、その上に瓦礫を積み、一斉に油をかけて焼きます。
People in the city laid dead bodies on top of another in vacant lots and by the roadside, put rubble on them, poured oil, and burnt them.
広島中に真っ白い煙が立ち、臭い匂いで、広島は火葬場になっていきました。
White smoke rose all over Hiroshima. A bad smell filled the air. The entire Hiroshima became a crematorium.
その中を移動していくので、服や体に臭い匂いが染みついて、水さえのないこともありました。糖分が体から取れませんでした。その中を3日間、友達を運んで避難していきました。
People who walked in the city smelled awful. Couldn't even bring our friends to a safer place.
原爆投下から3日目の午後、私の町は焼け残っていると言われて、友達と2人で帰る途中、偶然父と出会いました。
On the third afternoon, I was told that my neighborhood had not been destroyed by fire, so I decided to go home with one of my friends. On the way, I happened to come across my father.
父は原爆が落ちるとすぐその日から工場の焼け跡を私の名前を呼んで死体をひっくり返し顔を確認して探してくれましたが見つからず中学生、女学生は全滅だと噂が流れてもう死んでいると思ったそうです。
My father had been looking for me since that very day of the bombing at the burnt factory site, calling my name and turning dead bodies over one after another. He couldn't find me. He had heard that middle school students were all dead, so he thought I was also dead.
それが元気な私と出会えたので、父は喜んで、よう生きとった、と友達と2人を抱きかかえ、泣いて喜んでくれました。
He was so happy to see me and said, "Thank goodness you are alive. You are alive." He held me and my friend in his arms and cried.
その時、父のカバンの中には、着替えの肌着と白いおむすびが一つ入っていました。
In his bag, my father was carrying my clean underwear and a small rice ball.
あの頃、食糧難だったために、私の家にはお米はなかったと思いますが、母が何かの時にとわずか取っておいたお米でおむすびを作り、見つかったら死ぬ前に一口でも食べさせてやってほしいと、生きているか死んでいるかわからない私のために泣き泣き作ったと聞きました。
As food was scarce in those days, we didn't have much rice at home, but my mother made the rice ball from the emergency stock of rice so that I could eat it before I died if my father found me. I heard she made the rice ball shedding tears.
父はそれを持って3日間死体をめくって私を探してくれました。そのおむすびを見たとき一気に涙が溢れ出ました。親の愛情を感じた瞬間でした。
For 3 days, my father looked for me carrying that rice ball. When I saw the rice ball, tears flowed from my eyes. I knew how much my parents loved me.
それから3人で帰る途中、川の中は馬と人がいっぱい死んでいました。広島の7本の川は何日もこのような状態が続いていました。
On the way home, I saw a dead horse and many dead people in the river. The 7 rivers in Hiroshima were like this for many days.
私は帰宅して8月いっぱい寝たきりで食欲はなく高熱が出て歯茎から大量の出血がありました。これは放射線の初期の影響ですが、あの時何も知らないので母が大変心配しました。
I went home and became bedridden until the end of August. I had no appetite. I had a high fever and my gums bled badly. These were early symptoms of radiation effects, but we knew nothing about radiation, so my mother was really worried.
腕の傷は可能して帰った時はウジ虫が湧いて、祖母が泣きながら割り箸で一つ一つウジ虫を取ってくれました。薬もお医者さんもなく可能するばかりです。
The wounds on my arms festered. By the time I got home, they were covered with maggots. My grandmother removed them with chopsticks. She was crying. There was no medicine or doctors. The wounds didn't heal, but continued to suppurate.
2ヶ月ぐらい経ってようやくお医者さんに見てもらうことができて、傷口からガラスの破片を7個取り出してもらいました。
2 months later, I could finally see a doctor. He removed 7 shards of glass from my wounds.
麻酔はなく3人で押さえつけられ、悲鳴を上げながら取ってもらいました。足はパンパンに腫れ、当分動くことができませんでした。それでも私は生きることができました。
There was no anesthesia. 3 people held my body while the doctor removed the glass shards. I screamed. My legs were swollen and I couldn't walk for a long time, but I survived.
父は爆心地から 2.5 キロ離れた自宅で被爆して、やけども怪我もなかったのに、1年半後、血を吐いて間もなく亡くなりました。これは私を探すために3日間死体をひっくり返して焼け野原を歩いたために残留放射線を浴びたからだと思います。
At the time of the bombing, my father was at home 2.5 kilometers hypocenter. He was not burned or injured, but a year and a half later, he vomited blood and soon died. That was probably because he had walked in the burnt out city for 3 days, turning dead bodies over to look for me, and was exposed to residual radiation.
あの時、原爆も放射線も全く知らされていないし、色も匂いもないので、多くの人が市内に入って人を探しました。この人たちは大型原爆症で髪の毛が抜け、血を吐いて亡くなりました。
In those days, people did not know anything about atomic bombs or radiation. Radiation is odorless and colorless. So many people went into the city to look for people. Due to the radiation, many of them lost their hair, vomited blood, and died.
放射線が怖いのは、その被害がまだ終わっていないことです。78年経った今でも多くの人が癌や白血病で苦しんでいます。
What is frightening about radiation is that the harm has not ended yet. 78 years have passed, but many people are still suffering from leukemia and other cancers.
私も1999年胃がんのために3分の2摘出する手術をしました。多くの友達も癌で亡くなっています。
I had surgery for stomach cancer in 1999 and had 2/3 of it removed. Many of my friends have died of cancer.
被爆者である私は、これまでもこれから先も子供、孫、ひ孫の健康に不安を感じながら生きていかなければなりません。
As a survivor of the atomic bombing, I have felt this anxiety. I will continue to worry about the health of my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
これから戦後の話をします。戦争が終わって急に平和になり、生活が楽になったのではありません。むしろ戦後生きることが大変でした。
Now let me talk about the post-war years. After the war was over, peace didn't come at once. The life was not easy. Rather, the life after the war was more difficult for us.
父は被爆1年半後に亡くなりました。母は20年間生きていましたが、ほとんど入院生活でした。原爆症です。そのため、母の病院代と3人の弟を育てるために、私は一家の大黒柱です。
My father died 1 year and a half after the atomic bombing. My mother lived for 20 years, but she was mostly in hospital due to illness caused by the atomic bombing. I had to work to pay for my mother's hospital bills and to raise my 3 younger brothers. I had to support my family.
10年間夢中で働きました。私は幼い頃から教師になりたい夢を持っていましたので、教員養成所のある学校へ入学しましたが、その夢も叶うことはありませんでした。
I desperately worked for 10 years. I used to have a dream. I had always wanted to be a teacher since I was a child, so I had entered a school which offered a teacher training course. I could not realize my dream.
毎日の生活の中で一番大変だったのが食料がないことです。戦中戦後、日本は本当に食料が不足して、食べ盛りの3人の弟に食べさすものがないという日も何日かありました。生きることの大変さを身をもって感じました。
What was most difficult was that we didn't have enough food. During the war and after the war, Japan was in serious shortage of food. My 3 brothers had big appetite, but sometimes we had nothing to eat. Life was hard.
その上、被爆した女の子は結婚できない。原爆は移る、遺伝する。結婚しても子供はできない。できたら障害児だ。ひどい差別を受けました。
I was also severely discriminated. People said the girls who were survivors of the atomic bomb could not get married. They said that the effects of the atomic bomb were contagious and hereditary. They said when the survivors got married, they couldn't have children. If they had children, they would be disabled, they said.
あの頃言われていました。原爆は死んだ人も地獄だったが、生き残った者も地獄だったと。本当に地獄でした。
In those days, people said it was hell, not only for the dead people, but also for the survivors. It was a hell.
毎日父を返してほしい。母を元の体にしてほしいと原爆を恨み、アメリカを恨み、日本の政府も恨みながら生きてきました。 空白の10年と言われますが、貧困と差別で苦しんだ10年でした。
I wanted my father back. I wanted my mother to be healthy again. Every day I lived hating the atomic bomb and America. I hated the Japanese government too. People say the first 10 years was a lost decade. During the decade, I suffered from poverty and discrimination.
証言を始めたきっかけです。私は叔父の紹介で被爆者と知って、それでもいいという人と結婚しました。2人の娘と4人の孫、ひ孫4人います。23年前、主人が他界した時に、中学3年生だった孫娘が突然、証言活動を教えてくれました。被爆体験を話さずに死んじゃいけんよと強く勧めてくれました。
The reason why I started talking about my experience. My uncle introduced me to a person who was willing to marry me, although he knew I was an A-bomb survivor. I have 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. When my husband died 23 years ago, my granddaughter, who was in the 9th grade, told me about survivors' testimonies. She strongly suggested I should tell my experience too. She said I must not die without telling my experience.
原爆は嫌な思い出ばかりです。忘れようとしていたことを55年経って思い出して原稿を書くことになりました。2001年3月から証言を始めました。
I only have bad memories about the atomic bombing. I had tried to forget about it for 55 years before I wrote about it. I started giving testimonies of my experience in March 2001.
証言を始めて間もない頃、外国の高校生に証言した際、アメリカの男性が今もアメリカを憎んでいますか尋ねましたので、10年間恨みながら生きてきましたが、今は恨んでいません。恨んでいては前に進めないし、幸せになれないと思うからです。と答えると、ごめんなさいと深々と頭を下げました。
Soon after I started telling my experience, I met high school students from overseas. A young man from America asked me if I still hated America. I said, for the first 10 years, I hated America, but I don't hate America now. If I hated America, I couldn't move forward, so I don't think I can be happy that way. Then he said, I'm sorry, and bowed deeply.
その青年の姿を見たときに、こんな若者に謝らすことはない。アメリカの一人一人もみんな平和を願っていることが分かり、その時、心の底からスーッとわだかまりが消えました。あれから23年経ち現在に至っております。
When I saw this young man, I thought I didn't want to make him apologize. I knew that American people all want peace. I felt something in me changed. 23 years have passed since then.
最後に、現在地球上には約12,500発の核兵器があります。今の核は広島で使われた核の数千倍の威力があると言われます。
Before closing, I have a request. It is said that there are about 12,500 nuclear warheads on Earth. I understand that the nuclear weapons of today are thousands of times more powerful than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima.
万が一、一発でも爆発すれば、世界は汚染され、人類滅亡の道をたどります。そんな中、各保有国の中には、使いやすい小型の核兵器を作ろうと、核軍拡の道を示した国もあります。
If one of them explodes, the world will be contaminated and the human beings will take a path toward annihilation. Among the states that possess nuclear weapons, there are some that are driving nuclear arms race by trying to develop small usable nuclear weapons.
核問題は78年前の話ではなく、今現在の問題です。一人一人の市民が平和を願い、 核兵器のない社会を実現しようとする意識を持ち、世界の人々と連帯を強め、それぞれの活動に取り組んでいくことが必要です。
Nuclear issues are not the past history of 78 years ago, but what we face today. Each of us citizens must call for peace. We must seek for a society without nuclear weapons. For that purpose, we must work together with people around the world and do what we can.
あの一発の原爆で14万人の人が亡くなりました。一人一人に名前があり、家族があって、普通の生活をしていました。あの日、死ぬるなんて誰も思っていませんでした。それぞれの大切な家族、大事な友達が何も訴えることができず、無念の死を遂げました。この思いを一人でも多くの人に伝えることが、ここまで生き残った私の務めだと思っています。今、世界にある12,500発の核がすべて廃絶された時こそ、原爆で亡くなった人が浮かばれます。
Due to that single atomic bomb, 140,000 people died. They all had names, families, and lived their usual lives. No one had thought they would die that way. They all died in regret without being able to say anything to their beloved families or friends. I think it is my duty as a survivor to talk about these people to as many people as I can. When all the 12,500 nuclear warheads are abolished, the victims of the atomic bomb can rest in peace.
一人の力は小さくても平和を求める多くの人の力と亡くなった人の魂によって必ず核兵器は廃絶できると確信しています。そのため微力ながら日夜証言に励んでおります。
One person may not be able to do much, but should many peace-loving people join, and with the help of the souls of the deceased, I believe nuclear weapons can be abolished. Although I cannot do much, but every day I would like to do what I can through telling people of my own experience.
核兵器のない平和な世界にするために皆さんは平和のランナーとしてしっかりバトンを次の人に渡してください。よろしくお願いいたします。
In order to realize a peaceful world free of nuclear weapons, I'd like to ask you to be runners for peace and relay your buttons.
ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
It is difficult for everyone from our side to find exact words to describe the experiences of Miss Yoshiko Kochimoto and the way she brought everything to us through her excellent way of expression and these wonderful images which actually gave us the entire pen picture of what actually happened on that particular fateful day of 6th and followed by. And the only thing what comes to my mind is that it is one person, actually one person can change the world. And we have today with us on the other side, Yoshiko Kochimoto ma'am, the one actually is a sign of divine light, a symbol of faith, hope, determination. And ma'am, you asked us for peace. From our side, from our own country of India, we also love this word of peace and we always boot out for that because that's how the tradition of India is all about. And we are on the same route in terms of tradition with Japan and India. So on behalf of all students of this wonderful country called India, and so is the teachers and everyone, I express on their behalf that we will always stand by for peace, and we'll always stand by the country called Japan, which is not only known for precision. Obviously, when we talk about Japan, it is precision, it is about technology, but we are so honored to have you on the other side, the one who are very generous people who want to help world, though they went through this terrible kind of situation, but still you hold no regrets, no animosity against any country. That shows that people of Japan are undoubtedly one of the finest individuals on this earth. And we are so honored to be with you at this virtual platform. And we also want to express the same thing, that whenever you need anything from our end, maybe virtual in the sense or in the other side as well, we'll be always there to help you. It was wonderful, wonderful way to understand what actually went through, because from our side, we know it from the history textbooks, we know it from the other sort of books, or maybe from the films. But today it was something which we never thought about, kind of things which went through. It was.
Excuse me, may I just briefly translate what you have said to me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. 梶本さん、今日は本当にありがとうございましたと。で、お話を聞けて光栄に存じますと。で、とても苦しい苦労をなさった経験を私たちにこうやってお話をくださったこと、8月6日に起きたことを話してくださったことを、感謝いたします。それから、一人ができることは、あまり大きくないけどみんなで力を合わせて、世界を変えたいとおっしゃいましたけれども、一人一人が世界を変えていくことはできると私たちも思います。そしてインドも、それから日本も平和を愛する国であります。そしてインドも日本も同じ歴史を、共通の歴史を持っている部分もあるわけです。平和の側に私たちも立っていきたいと思います。日本は技術が発達した国なんですけれども、私たち、このような力を合わせて状況を変えていきたい。で、梶本さんは、その憎しみを今持っていないというふうにおっしゃいました。日本の方々は本当に素晴らしい方々と思います。そして、そのような、梶本さんのお話をお聞きできたことを大変嬉しく思います。
ありがとうございました。
So, Mr. Samir さん、質疑応答があるか聞いてもいいですか？はい。Do the students or on your side, do you have any questions to ask her?
My gratitude, Ma'am Yoshiko Kazimoto and the interpreter, Ma'am Naoko Koizumi, Ma'am. A heartfelt thanks to the Peace Memorial Museum of Hiroshima and to your account, which was actually very, very, I would say, spine-chilling for us. We have read stories, as Samir sir rightly said, but listening, coming straight from the mouth of a person who has gone through it, has really opened a lot of thoughts. Ma'am, can you translate for her first? Then I can go ahead.
Yeah. まず、何人かで質問があるみたいなんですけれども、梶本さん、それから通訳の小泉さんに感謝をします。はい、それから平和文化センターの皆さんにも感謝いたします。本当に心にしみる、なんか恐ろしい出来事、お話しくださって、印象的なことでありました。Do you have any questions?
There is Shravani Pawar. Do you want to ask anything, Shravani? You have raised your hand. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Then there is Sanchit Pujari.
Yes, ma'am.
Please put your camera on. Please put your camera on.
Hi, ma'am. I am Shravani from 11th standard. I would like to ask ma'am that how did Hiroshima did its recovery after that act, and who was the who played a major role to develop Hiroshima after that attack?
では、広島が壊滅したわけですけども、それから今の広島に復興してこられました。どういった方々がどういった役割を果たして今の広島にされてきたんでしょうか。
それぞれやはり市民がやはり元の広島にしたいという本当に強い思いで一人一人が頑張ってきました。で、戦後すぐにというのは復員した兵隊さんに出てた人が帰ってきまして、若い男性が焼け残った材木を使って本当に貧しいバラックを建てたところから始まっていくんですけど、みんな一生懸命70年は草木も生えないと言われた広島でしたけど、それでも草木が生えてきました。 で、やっぱりみんな頑張ろう。やはり広島が好きで、広島にみんな残って頑張って、一人一人が力を出し合って頑張って生きてきたんです。
And so each one of us, the citizens of Hiroshima, had a strong wish that we wanted the city to be reconstructed. Soon after the end of the war, many soldiers came back from war fronts after they were demobilized and came back to the city to see the burnt out city. And these people collected, for example, some pieces of wood from the burned out city and built some shacks or simple houses. That was the beginning of the reconstruction efforts. And there was a rumor saying that for the next 70 years, there would be no grass or trees growing here. But we saw new buds and new grass and trees growing here. Everybody in Hiroshima, the people who loved Hiroshima stayed here, and every one of us made made efforts, as much efforts as we could to do whatever we could to rebuild the city. So did she answer your question? And if she did, are there any other questions?
Sangeeta ma'am, we just got 5 minutes more, so 2 more questions we can take.
Good morning, Mrs. Kajimoto ma'am. It's me, Riya Mishra here. Ma'am, I actually wanted to ask you the question. That was, what would you like the world to remember most about the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? And what will be the message these things would carry for the future generations?
では、広島と長崎のメッセージといいますか、どういったことを一番私たちに覚えていてほしいと思いますか？それから、これから先の将来の世代の人たちに対して、一番、願うメッセージっていうのは何でしょうか？
やはり一番に、絶対戦争は起こさないというのが一番の目的なんです。で、若い方には、やはり、戦争を知らない方の方が多いと思いますので、少しでもお勉強してもらって、で、いかに戦争いうのは残酷で、不条理なものかということを学んでもらって、二度と戦争をしないために何ができるか、みんなそれぞれの力を出して、知恵を出して、そして行動を起こしてほしいと常々思っております。で、何を知って、最後何でしたっけ？
将来の人に対するメッセージはこれでいいですね。
いいですね。
はい、将来の人に対するメッセージをとおっしゃいました。
だから、やはり、次の人に、やはり今の方は、しっかりお勉強なさって、次の方に伝えてほしい。だから、続けて、もう平和のために、一生懸命みんなで頑張ってほしいと思っております。だから、これで終わりにしないでください。続けてください。
And so war should be avoided by all means. Maybe younger people do not know about war as much as we do. And so please study about what happens under the war. War is cruel and war is irrational. I don't want to see any more war. And please, each of you think what you can do to avoid war. And please come up with wisdom and please come up with actions so we can avoid war. And for future generations, please continue, hand down carry on your messages to future generations. And please continue. I want the future generations to continue making efforts so that we will have a more peaceful world.
Ma'am, we'll go with the last question. This is last question, students.
Myself, Priyanka Bell. I would like to ask the question, what was the role of the military during the war and even after it?
はい。では先生のようなんですが、
はい。
軍隊が戦争中に果たした役割と戦後に軍隊が果たした役割は何でしょうか？
戦争中に軍隊はやはり国のためにと思って、命をかけてみんな それぞれ務めたと思いますけど、もう教育がそのように国のためにという、そういう教えで命をかけて戦ったと思います。で、戦後になってからは、やはり、間違ってたことは間違ってたとお勉強しました。それで、絶対戦争をしないために、軍隊の人は戦後に解散しましたからどのようになったかわかりませんけど、自衛隊というのができましたけど、これは、平和のために、世界中平和になるために努力して、お仕事しておりますから、戦争に関わるようなことはしてはないと、思っております。だから、災害があった時とか、いろんな時に、人に助けてくれているのが自衛隊ですから、国民のために、市民のために、本当に、やはり今の人も一生懸命、命をかけて、手伝ってくれております。これは、もうすべて平和のために、皆さんの幸せのために仕事してくださっております。
During the wartime, I believe that the soldiers who were mobilized risked their lives to fight for our country. And the education in those days was that they were taught that they should risk their lives for the country. That was the education. And after the end of the war, the military forces were disbanded, and so what was taught during the wartime or before the wartime and what was wrong was corrected. And in order to avoid war, I think education taught about peace. And not any armies or navies, but some time later, the self-defense forces were established. And I believe they were helping the country for peace and people's happiness in case when there are some natural disasters and accidents. And I believe they are risking their lives to help the people in those occasions. But I believe they are working for peace.
Request all the teachers, especially from the outside institutes, please unmute yourself and ask the final question, please.
I would like to ask how difficult it was to heal from all the hardships during and after the war period, and what kept you motivated throughout. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, could you please repeat your question again?
Yeah, sure. So, how difficult it was to heal from all the hardships during as well as after the war period, and what kept you motivated through all those hardships?
OK。それで、いろいろ辛いことがありましたよね。もう本当に苦労なさったと思うんですけれども、どうやってそれを乗り越えて来られましたか？で、そして今、どういったことが、人生の中で、モチベーションというか、生きる糧になっていらっしゃいますか？
戦後、戦争中は、両親がおりましたので、もう、ただただ子供でいられたんです。けど、戦後、両親が亡くなったり、病気になったりした時に、私は一番しんどい思いをしました。10年間が、本当に一番、私の人生の中でも一番しんどい10年でした。その時に、生きようと思ったのは、やはり父が亡くなる時の約束で、3人の弟を頼むと言った大好きな父が、との約束がありましたので、もうそれを果たすために10年間は、本当に夢中で生きてきました。で、結婚してからというのは、もうやはり、もう大家族でしたから、ただただ、もう その日その日を本当に、過ごしたような気がします。で、最近、もうこのような証言を始めてからというものは、もう世界の人とたくさんの人の出会いがあって、その一人一人に、やはり、人として、お互いに国間違っても、人間同士の話し合いが本当にできて、本当に幸せだったと思いますし、私は今この証言活動を、孫が進めてくれたことが本当に今感謝しております。たくさんの人との出会いがありまして、みんな一生懸命生きてるんだという気持ちが伝わってきて、絶対戦争とか原爆とかいうものを使わない平和な、本当に穏やかな世の中であってほしいということを常々、願っております。今が私は一番人生の中でも一番今幸せな時です。
Thank you for your question. During the wartime, because I had both my parents with me, I could stay, as a child. But after the end of the war, my father died and my mother was ill. So during these 10 years after the end of the war, these years were the most difficult years for me. And I was able to continue living because of my promise with my father. My father, before he died, he asked me to look after my 3 younger brothers. And I really loved my father so deeply. And this is the promise, the last promise I did with my father. So for these 10 years, I lived through these difficult years just to support my family, support my younger brothers. After I got married, I lived each day because the family was so big, so I had so many things to do. And then I started telling my experience to many people in the world. I met so many people. I was happy to be able to meet those people and could, exchange our views. And I thank my granddaughter who suggested me that I should tell my experience to other people. I really thank her. And I was able to meet so many people. I want no one, or I want the world not to use atomic bomb any longer. So, and also I don't want to see any war. And I want the world to be a more peaceful world. And meeting people, I'm very glad that I could share these views. So I am now the happiest in my life.
Yoshiko Kojumoto ma'am, we bow down with all admiration for your spirit and determination. And as you said about peace, we will definitely work our way as a teachers and so my all students across to bring that peace and harmony back in this world. We express deep admiration and gratitude to Yoshiko Kojumoto ma'am to come and express her what life she had been through, and it is inspiring for us that 1 hour is definitely going to change for us. The same bow down expression of admiration goes to the interpreter Naoko Koizume ma'am, who did a wonderful job to interpret so smoothly and so exact words into our own language of English, which we understand better. Though we try hard to understand, even the expressions were better from ma'am. And the same extension of admiration goes to Ryo Shizume ma'am from Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. She was constantly with me throughout from last month. We also extend the same to Kahori Wada, the one who was there for a few days with me on the other side of email and exchanging things about this entire event. And at the end, the wonderful institute called Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, which is doing the job which actually brings peace to the world. And all my dear students and teachers who are on the other side. We do end this event, though it is going to be end, but it's a new beginning for us. We definitely promise to bring peace, harmony, and Moto ma'am, we'll see you again by next year, and definitely it will be a great change within us, because next year we will come back and pledge to take peace and no war. So with this, it is a wonderful, wonderful beginning for us, though we end here. We once again bow down with all our sincere admiration to ma'am and to the entire people of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Samir-san, your wonderful closing remark.